About 9 months ago, I reviewed the Garmin Instinct 2, and I raved about that watch. And then about 3 weeks ago, Garmin released this, the Garmin Instinct 2X. And it's been significantly improved in almost every way. It has a built-in flashlight, a bigger screen, a bigger solar charging area, bigger battery life, and yet Garmin somehow, they forgot to accompany this device with a bigger price tag. Okay, I do want to be respectful of your time, so if you don't want me to win the YouTube algorithm jackpot for, having you guys watch the entire video, here's my quick summary of the Garmin Instinct 2X. I do think that this watch is a fantastic new rugged GPS watch offering from Garmin that offers several upgrades over the original Instinct 2, including a larger display, a larger solar charging panels, which can result in improved battery life, and it has that built-in flashlight, which you guys know I love, but it also features updated activity tracking features. However, this watch still lacks some advanced features found on the more expensive models, like a detailed mapping screen, onboard music, or a touch screen. And we'll go into, what's missing in much more detail, but overall, the Instinct 2X is a really solid choice for outdoor enthusiasts who prioritize durability over some of those more advanced GPS watch features for an exceptional price. And the Garmin Instinct 2X costs $450, or the same price as the Garmin Instinct 2 Solar Edition. I'll also try to find a discount code for you guys if possible from the Dialed Cycling Lab, and I'll drop it in the description of this video, as well as pin a comment to the top of the comment section. It's not an affiliate link with that particular group, it's just like my local shop that I like to support. But the Instinct 2X comes in 3 colors, black, Garmin actually calls it graphite, flame red, moss, or white stone, which is the one that I'm gonna be showing throughout this video. They also make a tactical edition of the watch. It does cost $50 more, but it comes in 2 color options, coyote tan and black. And I don't have the tactical edition to show you guys, but it has the ability to use a white or a green flashlight, which again is more friendly to night vision goggles. And it also has a kill switch that wipes the device, and then it has the jump master mode for parachuting. Again, not an activity that I've tried with this particular watch. I've mostly been swimming, biking, and running with this watch over the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, but there is a lot of differences with this watch when compared to the other sizes of the Instinct 2. And the other sizes are a 40mm version and a 45mm version. This one is the 50mm version, and I do think it's the watch that you want to get as long as you're okay with the bigger watch size. But here's this watch, and here's how it looks on my very tiny, but still very manly 165mm wrists. And then Garmin is using that extra watch real estate to increase the screen size, the battery life, and again, as I mentioned before, the solar voltaic solar panels. There's still these 2 screens to this watch. So that's a monochrome, sunlight visible, transflective memory and pixel 1.1 inch screen, and a very small 27 by 27mm little circular screen on the top right here. And then that bigger screen, it is nice and readable because of the monochrome display. It is very high contrast, but it's also not gonna be the sharpest display that you'll ever see. In fact, you can probably make out each individual pixel, especially when you're reading text or there's some sort of notification that pops up on this watch. The pixel density is only 176 by 176 pixels. And that lower pixel density means that you literally can't fit as much information on this screen. So that means that you're stuck with a maximum of 5 data fields per screen within each activity type. And again, this is not a touch screen. It has Garmin's normal 5-button layout. So that's a backlight button or a quick menu button on the top left, then up and down buttons here on the left, and then on the top right, a selection button, and on the bottom right, a navigation backwards button throughout the operating system. I don't miss the touch screen all that much personally. I actually find the buttons to be very nice, very big, easy to find, easy to click, I actually haven't had any issues kind of quickly getting around the standard Garmin operating system with its very deeply nested menu system. But the Instinct 2X is somewhere between 14.5 and 15.5 millimeters thick. It's actually a little hard to measure this one because the bezel sticks up so high around the device, but it is a pretty thick watch, and often that'll give the watch a very kind of bulky feel to it. But this watch doesn't feel too bad. It's actually fairly lightweight. The Instinct 2X comes in at 67 grams, which is pretty similar to something like the Garmin Enduro 2, and a little heavier than some of the Forerunner watches that we tend to test on this particular channel. But it's definitely not as heavy as something like a Phoenix 7X or a watch like that. Now, I like the way that this watch wraps around your wrist with the standard watch strap that it comes with, but you can actually swap it out if you want something different. I actually use these little puck charging things for my Garmin watches when I charge them up. They're great, I love them. It's like 2 for $10 or something like that, and I'll link them below if you guys wanna check them out. But this watch band, the way that the charging piece sits and the way that the watch band is, it doesn't really sit flat very well, and you can't really use those puck chargers that I like. But if you don't like this watch band, all you have to do is kind of use a paper clip, push it in these little side holes here, and it'll pop right out. And then the watch body itself, it is compatible with any sort of third-party 26 millimeter quick fit compatible watch strap. And then of course, I have to mention my favorite part by far on this watch is that it has a built-in flashlight. I guess Instinct calls it the torch on this particular device, but you guys know me, you guys know that I love built-in flashlights on these watches. Again, I can't say this enough. This is the little piece that I use every single day. In the middle of the night, if I don't want to turn on lights and wake up the whole family, I'm using the flashlight to pick up and get whatever I need at night. Now, if you do have any of the Garmin watches with a flashlight, you can set the strobe status to on, after sunset, or off. It is off by default. You can set the blink pattern to blink, pulse, beacon, blitz, or cadence. When it's set to cadence, it'll try to blink red when the watch swings backwards and white when your arm swings forwards. It's actually a pretty impressive feature. Not something I've used all that much just because the days are getting longer here and I'm not up running early in the morning when it's dark. But if you do pick up the Instinct 2X, in the box, it's pretty much the basics. So that's the warranty and the safety documentation, an instruction manual, the watch itself, and the standard 4-pin charging cable that now actually has a USB-C connection type on the outlet side. And out of the box, my Instinct 2X was at 71% as far as battery life goes, and it said 29 days of battery life, which is absolutely crazy. And that's not really counting for any sort of additional solar charging that it might get. But even though I live in the Pacific Northwest, we have had a little bit of sun here over the past few weeks. Garmin is advertising this watch as 40 days in standard watch mode, or potentially unlimited battery life if it gets enough sun on its solar panels. And then when you are using GPS, set in that all system satellite mode, which is pretty much where I've been leaving mine, you can go for about 40 hours or 65 hours if it's getting enough solar. And those solar estimates, they're based on I would say, somewhat sunny conditions or about 50,000 lux of sunlight. And I would say that this is maybe a good time to mention that this watch at the time of this review, it doesn't have a Sat IQ option. Remember that Sat IQ is Garmin's fancy way of saying it'll auto select between multi-frequency mode and the standard GPS mode, with the goal of providing you with the best GPS accuracy while preserving battery life. So just to be crystal clear here, the Instinct 2 does have multi-band GPS. It just doesn't have that little intelligent switching between modes piece, that Sat IQ mode. I'd love to see them update that, so we'll hope for the best. But you can actually switch into that multi-band mode at any point, and when you do, you can expect about 27 hours of GPS life, or about 36 hours if you're getting those decent solar conditions that I mentioned before, about 50,000 lux. Now, what I found super interesting about this particular watch is just how much of Garmin's high-end software has migrated over to the Instinct 2X. So you'll get that fairly new morning report with this watch. You guys know I love that. You'll see details about how you slept, your HRV score or your heart rate variability. Again, that's a score looking at your heart rate and really kind of showing you how ready you are to take on a workout for that particular day. But it'll also show you that workout suggestion, or it can even show you calendar events if you've got it set up to show that. The report itself is editable in the settings area. But this watch also has a triathlon mode, and it also will provide you with running power directly from this device, not from a chest strap. You'll also see a training readiness score, which again, previously was really only made available on Garmin's high-end watches. So super impressive software on this Instinct 2. And I think when you're comparing this watch to Garmin's top-of-the-line watches, it's actually easier to kind of look at what's missing as opposed to, what all features it has. So real quickly, you can control music from your smartphone from this particular watch, but it doesn't have dedicated music storage. There's also no Climb Pro feature. That's Garmin's kind of hill information. So when you're out on a climb, you can see gradient information, things like that. There's also no stamina metric, which again, is a newer metric from Garmin, but it estimates how fatigued you are during any sort of given cycling or running activity. There's also no running dynamic metrics directly from this device. You can use that HRM Pro heart rate monitor that does provide running dynamic information to watches if you want to. So those are metrics like ground contact time, vertical oscillation, or balance. And I've said this before, I know some of you guys will debate this, but I don't think that there's a ton of people using those metrics. I know some of you guys are, I'm just saying that I think you're far and few between. So not a huge loss as far as I'm concerned when missing those running dynamic informations. But I think the biggest missing feature is the lack of true mapping on this device. It does have breadcrumb navigation, but you're not gonna see detailed surroundings of street names or any sort of details like that with this particular watch, which does make sense. Again, this display, it's really not set up to handle that level of detail. And then lastly, again, I mentioned this earlier in the video, it's not a touchscreen device, which also isn't a huge deal breaker for me personally. Touchscreens are great. They're great for navigating maps. Not an issue with this watch here, but I personally tend to gravitate towards using buttons within all of these watches, even when they do have touchscreens. So it is a trade-off that I'm happy to make for this particular price point on this particular watch. And I should also mention that this particular watch has boxing and mixed martial arts, which actually is a new fitness activity type that I haven't seen on any of the Garmin watches before, but I am seeing it here on the Instinct 2X. I'm sure that it'll eventually make its way to all the other devices. It's not like they're gonna put a ton of activity types on this watch that they're gonna keep from their higher end watches like the Phoenix series of watches. Just haven't seen it yet. Now, on the back of the Instinct 2X, you'll see Garmin's optical heart rate monitor. I think Garmin calls it their Elevate 4.0 heart rate monitor. And this heart rate monitor has the ability to detect your blood oxygen saturation levels or your SpO2 levels. Garmin calls it their pulse ox feature. And I always like to let people know that it does take a little bit of a hit on the battery life if you turn that on. So you can leave it in always on mode, or you can set it to while sleeping, or you can just turn it completely off. If you're not sure, I'd probably suggest leaving it off. But I've been seeing surprisingly good heart rate data from the Instinct 2X, considering its larger size. Again, usually with a larger size, if there is any bouncing around, it can affect the heart rate data and it can affect the accuracy there. But I think because this watch band wraps around my wrist so well, there's less bounce or less movement in this watch, but you can see that it does struggle a little bit to lock on, but then just like a lot of watches, after it locks on, it does do pretty well. And I'm comparing this Instinct 2X's optical wrist-based heart rate sensor here in red to a generally more accurate ECG style chest strap that's attached to a different device. In this case, it's the Forerunner 955, and that's in blue here. And then that's the wrist-based Apple Watch Ultra heart rate sensor, also here in green, which has also done really well in a lot of my previous testing. But if we switch over and we look at GPS accuracy, you can see that it's really, really good here. This route is with the watch in its default all systems mode. We're not even actually using that multi-band GPS GPS mode here, and you can see that we're looking at the Garmin Forerunner 965, the Instinct 2X Solar, and the Polar Pacer Pro here. And this is some dense trails and then also a mix of road, but to me, it really looks like that Polar Pacer Pro is struggling a little bit. It's definitely the furthest off, and the 965 and the Instinct 2X are really rock solid here. So overall, I really don't have a ton of major concerns when it comes to the data accuracy of this particular device. And that's kind of how the testing has gone with this watch. It's just been a rock solid option. And I think it's a great option for people to consider, especially considering the fact that it has such a reasonable price point. I'll say that I think it's reasonable for people to consider as long as you can kind of deal with 3 major issues, or maybe they're minor issues for you. But I'd say missing maps. I'd say if you are okay with the bigger size of this particular watch. And then third, if you like this particular rugged design, the look of this particular watch. But I think that this watch is a real winner for Garmin. Are there other nicer options out there? Sure, absolutely. The Garmin Epix watch, they have their whole Phoenix line of watches, but those watches are twice as expensive as this one. Are they nicer? Sure. Are they more full featured? A little bit, but I do think that you're going to be very happy with the trade-offs of this particular watch if you do end up with this Instinct 2X Solar. But those are just a few of my quick thoughts. Of course, I'd much rather hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Is the Instinct 2X something that you would personally consider? Definitely let me know in the comment section. You guys know me, I love continuing these conversations down in the comment section. But either way, be sure you're getting out there, swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys in the next one.